Well, hey, podcast listeners, it's TJ, and in episode 62 of the Pixar Post Podcast, we're going to share our interview with Toby Chu, the composer of the wonderful music for Pixar's short film Bao. We're also going to talk about some of the upcoming Pixar news, covering news on the Incredibles 2 box office successes, and really get down into the numbers. We're going to talk about Purl, a new experimental storytelling initiative, the second in the list. But wait, why did I say at the beginning of this that you're only hearing from TJ? Where's Julie? Is it possible she's back at Toy Story Land again? Yes. She's actually not able to join on this podcast. We tried to make it happen, and it was a whole thing of like scheduling between the two of us. So long story short, she actually does a annual vacation with her mom every year. And so she is off doing that, and she went down to Toy Story Land again, and then now they're in a couple other places, so they're moving around and having some fun. But yeah, we weren't able to get it to work out, so you just get me today. So what do you say, instead of doing some of our other normal fun things, like some trivia or things like that, we'll just jump right into the news. Sounds like a plan. All right, so first thing I wanted to get into was something that kind of took some people by surprise, and everybody got excited, and then they got disappointed. Does that sound like clickbait or what, or vocal bait? So Pete Docter joins Twitter. So wait a minute. He already was on Twitter, right? If you thought that, you were absolutely correct. So Pete Docter was already on Twitter. His name, as it is now, is Dr. Pete. So DOCTERPETE. The new handle that had popped up was Pete Docter 1. It got all sorts of attention. So whoever was writing for this seemed quite convincing in a lot of areas, but there were a couple that didn't seem as convincing as others. So I remember calling Julie and saying, do you think this is real? Because there's one of these that says, I don't mean to brag, but I have like my 3 films are in the top 250 of IMDb ratings or whatever. And both Julie and I immediately said, this just seems out of character to be Pete Docter. He definitely doesn't seem to be somebody that would be bragging and doing this type of thing. But then we started feeling more comfortable about it because we saw Brad Bird had actually retweeted his first tweet that said, I resisted it for years, but I'm here and I'm on Twitter now. And my film comes out in 2021 and all these other things. And so Brad Bird tweeted it, and I'm like, well, he's got to know something, right? Well, anyways, all was good to go for a little while there until all of a sudden other Pixarians, so Lee Unkrich, Dan Scanlon, start chiming in. And this is a couple hours later now, and people are really excited, talking to Pete, fake Pete. Fake Pete is talking back to them. People are saying how much they love his films, and he's saying, oh, that's so great, that means so much to me. So anyways, it wasn't really him. And so then Brad Bird got wind of that, and so he had to go back and delete his tweet. Or actually, he didn't delete it. He actually just went out there and did another one that said, you can't trust anything on the interwebs. Something like, I should be sleeping now anyways. So Pete Docter himself ended up coming on the very next day. So this is all on, I think, Tuesday or Monday. And what was interesting, and that would be like August 13th. So what's interesting is that Pete Docter's, that Dr. Pete handle had been opened, but never had a tweet. So I had always wondered, and many people had wondered, is this actually Pete Docter? Is this really him, or is this just someone else? But he posted on his real account of the Dr. Pete for the first time ever. He did 3 different ones, a drawing of himself. He did one about, checking himself, checking his color of his underwear. He goes, yep, it's me. So it was kind of silly, but anyways, he just told people that he's not going to post on Twitter, but he will be posting on Instagram, so you can follow him there and take a look. So his Instagram handle, in case you're looking for it, is just at Pete Docter, so you can find him there under that one. But I thought that was kind of an interesting roadshow to watch the comments going from just people in disbelief to excited to really excited when Brad Bird tweeted it. And then it all just turned around once Lee Unkrich and Dan Scanlon's tweet was something to the effect of, I knew this wasn't real when they said it was on Twitter. So apparently Pete Docter, not a fan of Twitter, I guess, at some level, and probably has made that known. But Anyway, I just wanted to pass that along because that was kind of a interesting little story. That Pete Docter one, it used to just say the name, like the official name of the account was Pete Docter, but now it says Pete Docter Fan. So somebody must have got wise to it and figured it out. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was actually Purl, and this is Purl. So what is Purl? Purl is a short film that's directed by Kristen Lester, who's at Pixar, and this is the second film released under the Experimental Storytelling Initiative, or as some other people call it, the Experimental Shorts Program. So it launched internally, or this program launched internally at Pixar in 2016. It's a way to let future talent stretch their creative muscles, work on approved projects, and see what they're able to do. So where this program comes into place is that they're taking up render time. So this definitely is something that has to be approved to work on. But these projects they're self-run, so there's no executive oversight. They get 20% of the budget of a normal short, so that's a big cutback. And it usually should take about 6 months to complete. So this is something that's a lot faster than what they normally do with a smaller budget. So it's interesting to see where these things go. So the first short that was part of this was called Smash and Grab, but that still hasn't been broadly released, so we don't really know too much, or most people don't know too much about it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Purl in that regard. But let's talk about a little bit about what Purl is. So the short film is a ball of yarn, aptly named Purl because of the purl stitch. So it's a knitting method, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know if it's a method or a type of a stitch that you can do. And at SIGGRAPH, they had announced, Kristen had announced that the short film was going to be screened there. And we haven't heard anything from the screening either, which took place on Monday the 13th again. So it's kind of been driving us a little nutty. So we're going to have to call and see if we can get Kristen to come on the podcast and share some details about Purl, if there's going to be any type of release information, or if it'll essentially be like a smash and grab and just be something that's out in the ether that might show up one day out there. Who knows? Maybe it'll show up as like a bonus feature on the newly announced, which we'll be writing about soon, the Pixar Short Films Volume 3, which has been something we've been waiting to come out for a little while. So that's exciting news too. But anyways, there was also a secret screening that was at the Annecy Film Festival a couple months back as well. So this has been out there. That was in June. So this has been out there for a little bit. The only thing that we know about it is from a kind of a technical white paper that David Lally wrote about. And there's a brief one-liner in that says the 8-minute short film, or we kind of reworded it a little bit. So the 8-minute short film Purl follows a ball of yarn trying to make her way in a male-dominated corporate world, and acts as a visual metaphor for some of Kristen's personal experiences within the industry. So definitely a now, and I'm air quoting, like a now type film, one that speaks to a female presence within the workplace, and certainly kind of mirrors what was going on a little bit with Pixar, with people calling it maybe a little bit of a boys' club and things that were going on with John Lasseter. Now, certainly that's not the intent of this, I presume, to be that direct and on the nose, but it's just, it's kind of neat that it seems relevant right now. So, if you haven't seen any details of this, definitely go ahead and check out our website. So for all of our episodes, you can go to pixarpost.com, click on the podcast button. Again, this is episode 62, and it'll take you to the post that has the details about Purl in there, because it's really cool to see. We've got about 3 different screenshots, or 2 of them are screenshots, and then one of them is within the animation system, showing kind of how some of that was working. A funny side note on this is, as soon as we posted the news on this, a couple other sites started either retweeting it or talking about it on Twitter as well. And they were saying immediately that this is the short film that's in front of Toy Story 4. And in the post, we specifically said we don't know if it's the short film that's going to be in Toy Story 4. And we actually say we don't think it will be, because of the fact that it's part of this program and because Smash and Grab was never associated with one. So, obviously we're trying to draw some correlations based on past history, but, we just said we don't think it will, but time will tell, we'll find out, blah, blah, blah. And of course, immediately it starts going. So I start replying to some of these people and said, I never said that, and just be careful because we don't want to make people think it is. If it isn't, we want to, just trying to be cautious about it. But of course, some of it just kept going for a little bit, but regardless, it was just a little silly story there. Additionally, just some cool things about the character. So Purl, the character itself, obviously a ball of yarn, like I said, like a pink ball of yarn. And the eyes of Purl are actually reused from toys that were in Toy Story 3. So that's kind of neat. And then also the lips. The mouth and the lips are actually a pull, a start, like of a base, if you will, from Bing Bong from Inside Out. So I thought that was a nice little pull. One of the aspects that they talked about at SIGGRAPH, apparently, was about how they've reused a lot of assets and how this experimental shorts program has to reuse a lot of those assets that are converted into Universal Scene Description USD format or placement, so that way they're able to use them and keep moving quicker because they won't have time to build everything out within that approximately 6 month schedule. But anyways, just wanted to point that out. So like I said, if you haven't read more or seen more about Purl, which seems very exciting, go ahead and check out our show notes. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Incredibles 2 news as well. So we already did our full review of Incredibles 2. We're not going to go and talk about that again. But what we wanted to do, since it's come out in a lot of regions now, we still have some more interviews that we're actually going to be sharing as well from when we were at Pixar a couple months back. But we also wanted to talk about the fact that the film's been really tearing it up at the box office. So obviously, a couple weeks back, it crossed over the $1 billion in box office revenue faster than any other animated film in history. So that's in 46 days is when it reached that mark. So that's really amazing. But let's check in to where Incredibles 2 is at today with box office. So that was as of July 31st that it broke the $1 billion. So, and it was at the time at $1.2 billion in revenue. And this is, of course, worldwide. But as of August 14th, when I'm recording this, it's at $1.090 billion. So within exactly another 2 weeks, it's gained another 88 million, which is pretty impressive. And it still has 7 markets that it's going to open in. So it still is going to open in Turkey on the 22nd of this month, Norway on the 24th, Denmark on the 30th, Finland on the 31st, Sweden on the 31st, Italy on September 19th, and Germany on September 27th. So very impressive that it still has some room to grow. But what I want to do is kind of look at it a little bit more granular as well. Because if you've ever heard these podcasts in the past, I really like to get into the interesting nitty gritty of the numbers and kind of predict some things. So some other level setting though. So this puts it as the 3rd highest grossing animated film of all time. So that now has surpassed at the $1.090 billion. It has passed Toy Story 3, which was at $1.066 billion. But there's 2 films still ahead of it. So Minions was at $1.159 billion, and I'll be repeating some of these. And then Frozen, and I keep wanting to say Frozone. I'm glad I didn't, but now I did. Frozen still tops that list, though, at $1.276 billion. So let that sink in a little bit. We're within a realm. It's about like 170 million off of, or 120 million off of Frozen, but it should be noted, or actually a little more than that. So it should be noted that the highest grossing domestic animated film is now Incredibles 2 as well at 591 million. So Finding Dory, which previously held that record, was at 486. So it's another 110 million approximately above Dory in just the US, which is crazy. Frozen was at 400 million domestically. So this is 190 million above Frozen in the US. So obviously you can see so much of Frozen came from overseas. When we've done these analysis and these look backs before, we've talked about this where, Frozen outside of the US, Japan supplied 249 million to their total. So that's a huge amount that came just from even one other country. All All right, so what I did next is I took a look at those 7 countries that I listed, and I said, okay, if this movie, Incredibles 2, pulls anything even similar to Finding Dory, it should pull in approximately another 67 million, which that would assume okay, so I'll even take one step back. So assuming it makes nothing else in the US, that would put it at 1,157,000,000. So again, Minions was 1,159,000,000. So even if the predictions are even close to Dory, it would be 2 million off from Minions. So I think this has a really, really good shot of at least beating out Minions to be the second highest grossing. I don't know. We'll find out if it's got enough legs and continuation, especially globally, to beat out Frozen, but that's going to be a tough one just because of all those international markets that really piled on. I started then looking at other superhero films, Avengers and other top grossing ones in Germany and Italy and Sweden, and they're averaging out pretty close to what Dory was. So I don't think there's going to be any huge jump there. So if I had a prediction, I think it will overtake Minions. I don't think that it will overtake Frozen, though, even though I wish it would, because that would be really cool to have another Pixar movie atop those charts. Also because it was so darn good. So anyways, I hope you enjoy some of the geekery that we get into whenever we look at these box office numbers like that, because I certainly enjoy and have some fun adding it all up and trying to think about, what it'll be based on other films. So since I've been blabbing at you for a little bit now, let's go ahead and just dive right into the main portion of this podcast, and that was our discussion that we had with Toby Chu, again the composer of the music for Bao, which was this awesome East meets West mashup of this approachable, typical that we're used to hearing mixed in with some of that Chinese culture. It was just so cool. So before we get into it, I also had to have one other little personal story to tell. We actually did this interview a couple weeks back, before Julie was gone on her vacation with her mom. And if you've been on any of our Google Hangouts or YouTube Lives, as we've been moving forward going on YouTube Live, you've seen that sometimes our cat might jump up, and her name's Monster, named after Monsters Incorporated, because we got her in 2002. So we had come off of the high of seeing Monsters Inc. the year before, and we're still thinking about it. But she used to always jump up on the desk and just would make random appearances in our Hangouts, and it kind of became a thing that, we would chuckle about and a couple other people would comment on and things like that. Well, we wanted to pass along, not that it means much to the folks on the podcast, but unfortunately that led to part of the delay of us getting this interview out was we had to, unfortunately, Monster passed away. So we had to deal with some emotions there, and we used it as a great teaching lesson for our son about what you do when something passes on, and leaving any personal beliefs out of it. We actually found a great book, which, with all the love that's going on right now for Mr. Rogers, it was just so perfect that he had a book that he had written, had to be 70s, 80s, I don't know exactly, but the pictures are, you can tell they're older photos, but the content was still just absolutely perfect. And we were looking for something that just talked about the process, not necessarily like, here is, somebody's beliefs or anything like that. So it was just a great book. So if something like that does happen, Mr. Rogers, When an Animal Passes Away, or I think it's When an Animal Dies, it's just a great book. But anyways, we were just sad because it's another one of a mini Pixar connection that we had, because she had the name of Monster from Monsters, Inc., because we love that movie so much, and especially Pete Docter's work. But so we were saddened by that, but wanted to pass it on, so she won't be making any more appearances there. And then, like I said, the other delay was Julie going off on the vacation with her mom, and so that kind of just, we were trying to work it out. She was even calling in tonight, and she's like, I'm whipped. I gotta go to bed. So we ended up just saying, you know what, I'll just give this a go. So hopefully this is working out. But the big takeaways here, as far as chatting with Toby, is you'll find out some of his origins of how he found music and his passion and love for the art form, which essentially allowed him to push through being told no. And that's something that, we've heard before, and, anybody that deals with art probably has heard no at some point. But it's great to hear how he pushed through. So I'll let that kind of just be a little bit of a teaser. We'll talk about a couple other things here, but we'll talk about that more after the interview as well, because I thought that was really cool, how he kind of used that and turned it into a passion. So anyway, it's great to hear how he got involved with the project, how he was approached to work with Pixar. So you'll hear some of that. You'll hear about his process of working with the music, with the instruments, and really cool stuff there. So we start in the episode. We had already been talking for 20 minutes or so. So Toby gave us a call. We just started talking, and then all of a sudden we're like, okay, we better get this thing started, because between me, him, and Julie, we were all just blabbing back and forth about our lives and where everything is, and music and Pixar and all these things. So we just pick up right into it, and it starts with us basically taking a summary of everything we had done, and I was trying to mash it in. So it starts with us gushing about him for the beginning of it. So yeah, I really hope you guys just feel the passion and really take some of what he's explaining as a great learning opportunity for just life in general. I've quoted the Michael Makarovich interview. I've done a bunch. There's been other ones that we've done with Aaron Hartline that have really stood out as far as just, the past and where you come from and how you use that drive to push you forward. But there's also, I think, some really great nuggets in this one as well. So let's go ahead and listen to that interview with Toby Chu. Toby, first off, it is a complete honor to talk to you, and I don't say that lightly. I mean, obviously, we've been chatting a little bit before we're starting the official recording of this, but, Julie and I love scores. We know the importance of the score for a film, and we think about the folks that have the other composers and conductors that have worked with Pixar, and it's just such an elite group. We love so much of that and that process. We absolutely loved this score. We loved Bao. We loved the score that you put together. I love how it's a lullaby. It's a waltz. It has a few moments of classic cartoony feel that are sprinkled throughout there, obviously with the traditional kind of Chinese feel at the world music as well with the film score. And I know I'm going to talk a lot right now, but but I also have to say that I love the way it translates on all different speakers as well. So it goes perfectly on a laptop speaker. We've listened to it on our iPhones. We listen to it in our car, my car has like a 7.1 surround system.
Our HomePod.
We have a HomePod, which, holy cow, it sounds amazing on the HomePod. But those high notes still pierce through, and you still get that sense of the overall feel of the composition, whether it's a big piece or whether it's a big speaker or whether it's a small speaker. And I just love how it translated. So first off, we just wanted to say, wow, we love it.
Wow, thank you. I don't know what else to say. Thank you so much.
Well, I mean, like I said, it's our honor to talk to you today, so we really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, so obviously we'll get into some of the specifics of the short and our favorite moments and those types of things, and dive into the scoring process. But, for those that are listening to the podcast right now that might not know a little bit about you, give us a little bit about your background as far as, for instance, when did you start to choose composing as one of your paths? And, we've read that you're involved with painting as well. So how did you end up finding your way to this career?
Well, I started out, when I started growing up, there wasn't really any music in my family that I knew about. It was really, there was a lot of fine arts in my family. So everybody was kind of drawing and painting all the time. And this was, as early as I can remember. And my brother and I were drawing all the time. And I remember we were doing art competitions too, but I didn't really realize they were art competitions until much, much later. Because I remember, like, I don't know, maybe I was like 8 or something, and there was these boxes of like ribbons. They used to give you these ribbons when you were little, like if you did this art, and you get a blue ribbon if it's first place. And we had all these ribbons, and I was like, what is this? And my mom told me, like, oh, those are all those art competitions that you did. I'm like, oh, because I used to think that we would go somewhere, we would draw, and then they would give you a ribbon, and then you would go home.
You didn't realize that you were just winning everything?
No, I didn't know. It was like, we were really into it, and we drew all the time. And when I mean like we were into it, it was more like, we didn't have many toys growing up really. So we would my brother and I would kind of get these big pieces of paper and kind of draw like characters, and we'd like flick our pencils, and it would kind of make this line, like you would like shoot at like, you would kind of shoot at other kids players, and we made all these like games with drawing, and anyway, so we eventually, I went to an art high school, and there was painting was a big deal there. So like the kids there, like if you were like a cool kid, like your jeans would be covered in paint, sort of thing. Like the kids would be walking around with these torn jeans with lots of paint. So I was, it was just something that was in my life. We would, it was, we were really dedicated. We would paint in the middle of a rainstorm. We would paint these huge paintings that were, you had to get on a ladder. We would paint these giant paintings. And my art teacher there would always, he's a big influence of mine, and he would, occasionally I would play, I did do music. I did study music from when I was quite little, but it was always kind of a hobby, and art was kind of the main thing. Mm-hmm. I remember one time, like I would always play and perform at these art shows that we would have at school, and my teacher would be like, "Oh, come down from the stage. You're never going to make it as a musician. You got to paint. You should paint."
Wow.
And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah." And so eventually, my brother is 3 years older than me, and he was like really well known in my high school as a great painter. And they used to have this big art festival that they would do called Festival of the Arts back east. And people would come from all over to these art festivals. And if you were one of the top painters in the school, you would get one of the top spots. And that would be, it was like in our gymnasium. And they would put the top spots like right in the front as you went in. And my brother would always have one of the top spots. And when I went to high school, I was 3 years younger than him, and I came to high school, there were literally flags around the school with like canvas flags that people made that would say "Chu is God."
Wow.
And like, yeah, like he was like, and I'm like, coming to the school like, oh God, like no, like big shoes to fill or anything. Yeah. But like everyone knew of my brother as a great painter. And his teacher like kind of started recruiting me when I was still in junior high school. So I was already taking lessons with him before I went to high school. And I think he was trying to recruit me and make me kind of like like my brother. Mm-hmm. So having that coming to school, I think that kind of also triggered me to like want to do something different. I didn't want to, I was trying to rebel. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a weird thing. Like, I feel like, there's people who aren't into the arts and then they want to rebel and do something artistic. Whereas, I was already like being forced to do art, and I kind of wanted to rebel and do something different. So music was kind of something that was only I and my family did. So that became like my main focus. I was playing music when I was little, and I used to go to, music camp every summer, and I was in like the jazz band. I was like a nerdy kid in jazz band. And so music was always there, and I always played a lot. It just never was kind of the focal point until around maybe like early high school. From that point on, then I got really serious and studied and eventually went to music school. I went to University of Miami, which they had quite a good jazz program there. And I went there, and I was there for 2 years, and it was absolutely insane in terms of the music program. It was very intense, at least for me it was. And I remember I auditioned with the main teacher over there, the head of the department, and I played. And after I played, he's kind of sat there quietly, and he was kind of like, so do you have any other hobbies? Do you like to do other things too? And I said, yeah, I used to paint for a long time, blah, blah. And he's like, okay, that's what you should actually do.
Oh.
And I was like, and like, I mean, they're incredible, just deadpan saying that. And that like really motivated me, I think. I mean, at first I was really hurt, but he was like, I'm sorry, but we can't accept you you can't be in the music program. You can't, you're just not at that level. So I was like, oh my God, I was like, I'm going to show you. Yeah. So I just worked so hard, and I was practicing like 10 hours a day. And I don't remember going to any other classes except for performing. And I played classical guitar and jazz guitar, and I was just practicing all the time. I think I just left my room to the practice room to go to the restroom or eat something, and then I was just practicing. And then eventually I went back to the school. I mustered up courage to go back and audition with him again. And that was quite terrifying. And I auditioned with him again. I felt a little more confident. And then afterwards, he kind of looked at me and said, well, okay, so you're showing some improvement, but look, I'll let you be in the program, but you're going to be on probation, which basically means you, at the end of every week, every Friday, you have to have an audition to all the chairs of the department, and we'll decide whether you can still stay in the department or not.
Holy cow.
I can't even imagine that pressure.
I know. It was very intense. I was like, okay. And so every week it was just practicing and memorizing pieces, because I had to play like a couple pieces for them from memory. And every Friday, that's my entire life for those 2 years, was just practicing, and then going and doing these auditions every Friday. And the program was relatively small, and all the players there were phenomenal. And I remember being, I was taking music classes there, but they were telling me that you could only take a certain amount of music classes. You couldn't take other ones until you were officially in the program. I remember being in a class, and I was sitting with this one girl who was a flute player, and she was phenomenal. And I remember, and we were in this ear training class, and she could just look at notes on the board and just sing them, and she was just such an amazing musician. And one day she's like, oh, I'm leaving the department. I'm going to go, and I'm changing my major. And I said, what are you talking about? Why are you changing your major? And she's like, well, I'm just really not cut out to do music. And I was like, what? If you're not cut out, what am I doing here? So, it was very, very, I'm sure if you speak to a lot of musicians who kind of grew up and study a lot of music, I'm sure everyone has like a very strict teacher, and with music, no exception. There's a lot of those out there. And I think for good reason, because, it either drives you or it doesn't. And, another quick little memory I have of that time was I remember talking to another friend who was a pianist, and he was, again, like a phenomenal concert pianist, and he was playing and playing all around Miami and traveling. And eventually he told me that he was also going to change and do something different. He was going to do something in music, but he wasn't going to try to be a concert pianist anymore. And I asked him why, and he said, well, because I have to practice. And what he meant by that is, the concert pianists that he's going up against are so good.
Oh my gosh.
That they don't really even need to practice. And he actually has to practice. And because he has to practice, he's not really fit to do it.
Wow.
So it was really, really challenging. And so I was there, and I was on probation for the entire time I was there, until eventually I started meeting more of the players, and they only accepted, I think it was maybe 8 guitar players. And it was very kind of, they're very selective. And I remember one day I started getting to know more of the players there, and I was playing with one of them, and I was talking to him, and I got to know him pretty well. And I said to him, just to let you know, I'm on probation here. I'm not even really a student here. I've been working here for so long, but I'm trying to. And he's like, what are you he's like, man, we're all on probation. And I was like, what? And so it was like a thing that they told students. This is what he told me. So
yeah.
At least, so I don't know if that's necessarily true or not, but it made me feel better.
Yeah.
But it was, cause he was, he's one of the top guys over there. So eventually I transferred schools. And I think I just was kind of homesick, being all the way down in Florida, and I wanted to be kind of closer to home.
Mm-hmm.
And there was I used to always go up to Berkeley in Boston to my summer camps. That's where my summer camps were. And I knew Boston very well, and I loved Boston. And there was a teacher there who I really admired, named Mick Goodrick, who taught at New England Conservatory. And he was a jazz guitarist, but he was kind of more than that. He's just a very, very unique person, and the way he composes on the guitar, the way he composes music, the way he plays, it's very, very unique. But he only would teach maybe 2 to 3 students per year, and you have to kind of be selected by him. And he was kind of a dream. I wanted to always study with him, and I found out that he accepted me to study with him in Boston if I moved to Boston.
Kind of made that decision a little easier.
Yes, it made it a little bit easier, and so I got to study with him and be at Berkeley and study there, and there that's where I kind of got more into film composition and composition in general. And I finished my studies there, and eventually, it was either I was going to move to Los Angeles or New York. I don't know why. I didn't really know anybody living in either of those places, but when you're finishing music, everyone kind of talks, and they're saying like, well, you want to go where the music is, you need to go to either LA or New York. And so it just so happened like maybe I knew like 2 people in New York and 3 people in LA. So I was like, okay, that made up my mind. That's the decision. So drove cross country to LA and started working out here. I don't know if giving you guys too much detail. But,
no, it's great. It's great. It's definitely inspirational. I think what I pull out of it is that passion. And it's the same passion that we hear in some of the artists that we talk to at Pixar. Like, for instance, Michael Makarovich is an animator there. And he literally said something to me that I wish I could have heard eons ago, which is where he just talked about his focus and his drive, about how, he had all these other classes, but it was animation that he knew he wanted to do. So as long as he passed those other classes, he didn't want to fail them, but as long as he passed them, that was good enough. He wanted an A in animation. So just hearing that drive and that focus, it's definitely the same, that same feel as many of those artists within the walls. I mean, when you've got that drive, you can feel it. And it's so cool hearing, because we talk to so many of the artists that passion is still driving people in other areas of art as well. So cool.
Absolutely. I think that's probably one of the most important, to me at least, most important attributes if you want to go into, at least with music, if you really want to go into it, because sometimes I speak to like friends of the family, or sometimes I'll speak to some young composers debating whether they want to get into the industry and looking for advice. And one of the things I'll tell them is, if there's anything I would say, it really is just the passion and the love for doing it, because, and I think that trumps everything. I think it trumps even talent itself, If you really, really love it, if you really, if you're not going to take no for an answer, then I think you'll be okay. Because, at least with film composition, there's, we talked briefly about this beforehand about, the hours can be so grueling. The schedule can be so quick. Turnaround can be so quick. And, you'll spend a lot of time writing music. So it really helps if you love it.
Yeah.
Because, it's one thing kind of, sitting in front of the piano, looking out at the beautiful view out the window, and you just had your coffee and, you're deciding, okay, I'm going to write my symphony now. And you sit down and you write a piece of music and you go take a walk and have a glass of wine. But the other thing, the flip side of that coin is, okay, so you've been writing every day, 7 days a week, 9 or 10 hours a day. You're really, really tired. You haven't gone home for a while. It's starting to smell. And you have no, all the ideas have been drained out of you. You're really, it's 4 a.m. The director's coming at 8 a.m. You have to write this piece of music. How are you going to do it? And if you really love it, when you have that extra, I really love this, at that point, it'll allow you to get through those situations, I think, a lot better. Now, I think it'll help you to write better music.
Yeah. Now, speaking of love, Domee and Becky had nothing but admiration for you when we had spoken with them.
Oh God.
Yeah, they talked a lot about how your personal connection to the film, obviously how it kind of mirrors your life story. And then also just as far as, your work on the film and what it meant to them to have you be connected to it. So talk a little bit about not only the connection to the film and, how that mirrors your life, but then also working with Domee and Becky Neiman-Cobb and Pixar
Oh my gosh. Oh gosh, where do I start? It was really like, it's corny, but it was really a dream come true. Every aspect of the project, and I've told them this too, and I even said to Domee and Becky many times, I'm like, I walk up to them like, I'm about to gush. So they're like, no, it's okay. Because I was just gushing constantly, and it's such a weird thing because I can hear myself gushing constantly.
Yeah,
I'm like, God, Toby, you're so annoying. Stop gushing.
Oh, we get it. We do that.
Hello, what have we been doing with you?
I'm like, no. I mean, it's so like, even at the scoring session, I was there, and I still couldn't help myself because I was pinching myself that I was actually in that situation, and being a fan for so long. And then getting the opportunity to be able to score a Pixar short really has been unbelievable. And even through the 1.5 year long process, I barely told anybody that I was doing it because I was so afraid I was going to jinx it or something was going to happen and it wasn't going to work out or something, because it was so important to me that I didn't, and I would speak to Tom McDougall, who's the vice president of music at Disney Pixar, and I would say to him, every so often, I'm like, do I still have the job? Still going well? He's like, Toby, you're safe. And I'm like, no, I mean, so it was just, it really was an amazing experience, and it's, and that just overcoming that fandom was really hard for me.
That must have been kind of hard because you're kind of the quote unquote, because the movie doesn't have dialogue. So you're kind of the dialogue for the entire short film, like your music. So it was like no pressure.
I know. Yeah. It was, it's interesting. I think when it came to the music side of things, there was, I suppose, some pressure, but I never really felt it. I don't really recall myself ever sitting there in front of the computer and the keyboard thinking, oh God, Toby, you better get this right. It was, I think I was so, I don't know how to describe it. I was just so excited to work on it. And the fact that I had, a really deep personal connection with the story, it's almost like I already kind of inside my, my heart, I felt like I knew emotionally what I needed to do. Mm-hmm. And the challenge was to get it out properly and accurately and authentically. And speaking about, and Becky and Domee, I can't even begin to I'll probably start weeping or something. But they were so wonderful throughout the whole process, and so protective of the music process, and so probably had more confidence in me than I did in myself. The first time I went to, I got the call to go over to Pixar. I didn't know Domee, I didn't know Becky. I didn't know who I was meeting with. I didn't know what the project was. It was very secretive.
Wow.
And I just flew up with Tom to Pixar for the first time. So I was incredibly excited. To say excited just sounds weird for me to say it because it's just not enough. It just doesn't describe
absolutely
the feeling. So, so I walking down I got dropped off and heading towards the Steve Jobs building, and there's the big Luxo lamp and the ball.
Yep.
And I'm trying not to start skipping.
Yeah.
I'm like, Toby, you're an adult.
Yeah.
Keep it together. And I'm walking over to it, and I'm like, okay, I gotta take a selfie. I gotta take a picture of myself with this, and I'm feeling really embarrassed. How do we do it so people don't stare at me?
Yeah.
But I went in and I got to meet Pete Docter right at the doorway, and then we went inside and Tom introduced me. I think Tom just came out from a screening of Coco, and I was like, oh my gosh, how is it? He's like, it's really good, and just totally calm. And I was like, I don't know how you keep it together, but I admire you for it.
Yeah.
But so I got to meet Becky and Domee there in the huge atrium.
Uh-huh.
And then we went, I can't even remember. I think I was I was tunnel vision at that point.
Yeah,
we
it happens.
It
happens.
You know what it's like. And so they played me the short for the first time, and it was in storyboard, and it was kind of, my thought process was kind of going between, oh my God, I'm at Pixar, to wow, this is really beautiful, and then it kind of transitioned to like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Because there were so many parallels with my personal life.
Yeah.
And afterwards, they kind of like stopped and looked at me, and they're like, "What do you think?" And I was kind of looking around the room. I was like, "This is my life. Like, I'm the dumpling." And
now, did they know that?
no, they didn't.
Wow.
And I really did think that maybe Tom or someone like knew something about my life somehow. I don't know, but it was almost like fate, you know.
Yeah.
And I just felt like I had such a deep connection, and Domee was kind of laughing. She's like, "Yes, use that, and tap into that." And so we had a talk then about like a long discussion about the arc and the of the music, and Domee really wanted to combine East and West, which made a lot of sense in
absolutely.
many ways. So we discussed that, and so it was, at that point too, I didn't have the job. I had to actually demo for the job. So they brought me in to see it, and then they asked me to write something from what I saw, like a piece of music or something. So I didn't really have the job then. And I remember talking to Tom afterwards, and we're heading back to the airport. And I was kind of probably still gushing at that point, saying, I have this in common with it and this common with it. And he's like, it's great. It's like there's that extra 1% that, because you have that personal connection, and, I'll take it. In the end, I think it's looking back on it, I think it was a great thing, because being Pixar, everything has like multiple layers of meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Even to the title, Bao,
Yes.
having different meanings. So it was kind of a great thing. And I think, I still feel like I'm unbelievably lucky to, for them to have asked me. And I would say, you guys could have hired anybody, why me? And so, when I finally, got down to it, when I got into the writing process and I started working on it, and started initially working on the theme is what I was hunting for first. Everything, the music kind of came naturally as soon as I, besides the fandom and the kind of excitement, and I felt like it's almost like the excitement of like, I know what to do here, Toby, just do it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you've done this, and it's not it. And the other thing too is, I think, as a composer, as a film composer, and you're working on lots of different projects, and not just me, but other composers I know, you're working on you watch a film and you try to find some personal connection, and, if it's an emotional scene, this and that, or a relationship thing happening, and you can kind of draw upon that. I've never heard of anyone being in a situation like this, or myself included, where the project itself I have such a personal connection with.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That you're sitting there, like before I even written a note, I just kind of sat there and just really tried to almost play back things that happened in my childhood, because I really wanted to, because I have so much respect for Pixar and the stories and the composers that compose those features and shorts, that I really wanted to, do my absolute best. So, I didn't cut any corners. I did a lot of research, and I'm really happy, with the result.
Yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful piece. So you mentioned the main theme. Is that the piece that you put forth in the first round that you gave to them, or did the theme come a little bit later? And how did you find that like simplicity that can be joyful yet sad at the same time?
Well, it was tricky, because initially when I started with the theme, I was just working on a piano, mm-hmm. and I knew that I wanted the whole short to be based off of one theme, and I usually agonize a lot about what the theme is, and it's almost like trying to tell the story with just these notes, just with a select few notes. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to be simple. I wanted to come from an honest place, and it's also using, because of the East and West idea, the theme itself is in like a Chinese scale, which is very common in Chinese traditional music.
Yep.
And it's like a 5-note scale. So one thing is like, okay, I have these 5 notes, but I can't write the entire short in these 5 notes. You know, I kind of want to, this is Disney, this is Pixar. Obviously you can cover all that with just Chinese instruments, but I wanted to kind of infuse both of them together. So it was a challenge, but on one side of it, it's the theme is using the traditional 5-note scale, but the way it's being played, the notes, the order in which they're chosen is more kind of a Western thing.
Interesting.
It's almost like kind of like a lullaby, kind of like a folk tune.
Absolutely.
But on the other side, it's a waltz. And I wanted it to be a waltz because it's kind of whimsical.
TJ's
kind of
pointing at himself
fairy-tale-like.
right now, giving himself a pat on the back. He's like, I knew it.
So having like it's kind of a mesh already. Not even counting the fact that there are a lot of Chinese traditional instruments and also the orchestra, but just not even counting the instrumentation, just counting the theme itself and how it's used is already kind of a mesh between East and West.
Yeah.
And having, Chinese traditional scale and set as a waltz, which is less common.
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to say, and that's what we absolutely love about it, is that it does blend so much and it brings so much to the score. I mean, but
it's warm.
Great.
And it's weird if you can when you listen to it, it's like, it's a very warm, happy score. And then it gets kind of sorrowful, around that, about 4-minute mark. When when Bao goes to be with his friends, and then about 5 minutes when she swallows her fear or her feelings for her son leaving. And it's just like, it's so beautiful, but then it warms up again. And I don't know. That's how I feel like when I listen to it. It's like warm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
And from the waltz standpoint, I think that's my favorite part, is the waltz feel, because I love how a waltz carries the story through, because it has a natural feel of progression with the swings of up and down and back and forth.
Yeah.
And so I think it really works well with story. Like, I love how Up has that waltzy feel. And it is one of those things where it's that gentle dance of emotions and everything. So I think that is such a cool thing. I love hearing you say that, how it combined, the waltz and the East and the West and all that kind of stuff. What instruments were like some of the main ones that were in there? Like, so we were just hearing and kind of trying to pick a couple things out. Like, there's like an erhu maybe, or like a gusheg, if I'm pronouncing that.
Guzhen, yeah.
So what else is in there that are the standout ones that are more traditional?
There's the erhu, the guzhen, the yangqing, which is kind of like a Chinese dulcimer. There's a pipa.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like a Chinese lute.
Yep.
4-string lute. There's a dizi, which is like a bamboo flute. We use all sorts of different dizis and bamboo flutes. There's the sanxian, which is it's, how do I describe it? It kind of is like a Chinese banjo in a way, in terms of how it sounds. So I mean, and what else is there? There's so many different ones. Even with percussion, and a lot of the percussion also, there's kind of subtle percussion throughout. A lot of that was actually percussion that was played on, like, for example, on the pipa. So we'd like take the pipa and flip it over, put it on your lap and play the back of it.
Wow.
Sometimes we would use brushes, where we would like brush the back of the pipa, or we would tape the strings down of the guzhen and use like soft mallets and play on the top of it.
Wow.
So a lot of the percussion kind of has like the resonance of it. It's not like a bongo.
Yeah.
The resonance of it is the instrument itself, which kind of blended really, really nicely with the other instruments.
Absolutely.
Because you still played with like a 60-piece orchestra, right?
That's right. It was a combination of both. Yeah, so it was great. It was really fun, and over the year and a half, I recorded a lot of instruments, and I learned a lot about them. And I have a good friend of mine who named Chili, who's a professor at UCLA, and she's like kind of the wizard in Chinese music over there. And she has a huge storage room with tons of these instruments. So I got to go and play around with all those. In the end, we recorded at Warner Brothers with the orchestra. So we had 2 days. We had a day with the orchestra and a day with the ethnic instruments. And that first day, you know, Domee and Becky and everyone flew in from Pixar, Pete Docter as well, all flew in for that session. That day was super exciting.
Yeah.
I think as a composer, that to me, that's the most exciting moment when you're in front of the orchestra and you hear the music come to life.
Yeah.
That is like one of TJ's dreams, is to watch music being composed for like film.
Oh my gosh.
Just literally like the hairs on your arms and your back. It just like, it's exactly what you said. It's coming to life.
Yes.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah. It's really exciting. It's you know, I mean, then, you know, some aspects of it though, you know, I mean, you're always welcome to come to the studio if you're on this side of the coast. But I mean, I have to warn you that a lot of it is kind of like watching paint dry, because, you know, I'll be working on something for a really long time and you'll be on the couch like, oh my God, this is taking a long time.
TJ's a very patient person.
Yeah, it takes a lot of pain and sweat in order to get there, and that's what makes it great.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so that's the interview. So what'd you think? Did you enjoy it? We certainly hope you did. So leading into the interview, we talked about how genuine Toby is, and, you know, hopefully you see what we meant now. So we didn't share our actual last question that we talked to because I took it in all sorts of crazy directions, these off-the-cuff things about talking about jazz music and how great the Incredibles score was, and then we meandered into personal stories of my friend who played jazz music, so I took it all over the place. So in any regard, you got to hear some of those great moments of how he creatively used the instruments by taping the strings down or playing on the back of the instrument to turn them into a percussive instrument. So that was really cool. Hearing those kind of things. I love those inside stories and details like that. But the other thing that I just really, really connected with was the whole talk of, you know, it either motivates you or not. And, you know, when you hear no. And so I thought that was really neat that, you know, you can't be stubborn when somebody says you no, or you probably want to be. You probably want to be angry and feel hurt by it. And like he said, he was for a while when he heard no, trying to get into that program. But it's one of those things that, how do you use it? What direction do you go with that? And that's something that, you know, I wish I would have done a little bit better. You know, if you hit some roadblocks, I wish I would have been that age and been a little bit more mature to just push through it versus shut down. But, you know, everybody learns from their experiences and it takes you a different direction. And I just think that some of these things that we've learned by talking to some of these other artists has just been pretty impactful to me, even though, you know, I'm not pursuing a career in music or anything like that. It's just still interesting to see how people take it and run with it. So hopefully you guys are getting something out of these as well. But be sure to listen to our next podcast as well, because we're going to share our interview that we did with Domee and Becky Neiman-Cobb, the director and producer, and talk about the whole short film Bao as well as working with Toby. So now you'll hear the other side of this by talking to the director and producer. All right, so that about wraps up this episode. Again, episode 62, so be sure to follow us on all of our social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Pinterest, and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Overcast, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Lastly, if you like today's show, let us know. Rate us on iTunes, leave a comment on our site, or send us an email at info@pixarpost.com. Signing off as usual, I'm TJ, and be sure to stay tuned to pixarpost.com all week for the latest Pixar news. Bye-bye.